and you keep your sanity as well.
Yeah, so growing fast is what everybody wants, to scale up, like how you said. We did 442% growth. So we actually went to 3 million.
Oh, congratulations.
And it was very rapid. And nothing is gonna be perfect. Like as business owners, like when we first start, like how you said you wanted to scale down, like we think everything is gonna be perfect. Nothing is perfect. Even with big, brands and companies, there is nothing perfect at all. So you just go with the flow. Like if you just go with the flow. That's the best way that I could say. Like you have to just have everything in order. The best advice that I can give somebody, like you don't know, like I didn't think that my company would go to $3 million so fast, like so rapidly, like how it did. And you just have to just be prepared. And if you have like that attitude or that passion for it, you just get the ground running and you just deal with it. But the best thing that I could say is that you need to just keep everything in order. As long as you keep everything in order, when you reach that havoc in your life, you can regroup because you have everything in order. You can go back and say, okay, like now I need to do this. But it was not easy, and there's nothing perfect, like which is what, as a business owner or entrepreneur, you have to realize, like nothing is ever going to be perfect. It's always going to be that pitfall somewhere.
Is there anything that you're doing differently now that you're forecasting that growth of 25 million, because you've already went through that period of, very quickly from starting to 2 million? What are you doing differently now to prepare for that next phase of growth?
For the first 6 months of my business, I did everything with the help of my husband. So I did everything, and then I realized oh crap, wait a minute, I can't do everything. So that's when I had to start hiring people. But then I had to take every dime and reinvest it back in, because when you're growing so fast, and I have a product, so when you have a product, I don't know how many people have a product here, but when you have a product, you have to, in order to have a business, you have to have the product. And the more you grow, the more inventory and more product you need. So I had to take every dime and put that money back into my factory, into fabric, into my production, into R&D. So I couldn't get a payroll. So what I did was I used every resource out there. We are in the day and age of tech all the way. There is, if you wanted to hire someone to build your website, you can get that done in 5 minutes. So what I did was I utilized Google. And I utilized every resource that was out there in order to do that. And I used freelancers. I didn't even want to put people on payroll, because that's from my background of running other people's business.
So you've been doing independent contractors and using online resources.
Exactly. So I alleviate the payroll in the Department of Labor of coming at me. So I do independent contractors.
But be careful with that.
I was going to say. I have a story. We can talk about that offline.
So yes, you have to make sure that it's set up correctly. You have to make sure that they're classified the correct way, where an independent contractor is, yes, as the attorney sitting next to me, as the independent contractor, you have to make sure that they're not just dedicated to your business. So right off the back, using independent contractors can help you grow completely fast, because there's no marriage there at all. Like with an employee, you're married. If they're your employee, you have so many responsibilities towards them. And growing a company that's growing fast, especially a bootstrap company like mine, you don't have, millions and millions of dollars just sitting in the bank. You don't have $30 million sitting in the bank, to do that. So you have to just utilize your resources.
And Kirk, your situation's a little different, because you don't have a product. You have to go out there and talk to people. So it's still very important for you to have a process so you don't burn out, because talking to 100 people versus 200 and now 1,000, and having to sell why the Caribbean is a valuable asset, I'm sure that became a challenge over time too. So how did you do that?
Well, I mean, we've had to find ways to put systems in place to communicate with folks, at the level that we're communicating at scale, right? Which more and more we've found a language. You essentially have to find yourself in a place with some level of templating, where you're not trying to redesign how you communicate every single time you're going to someone, right? And I think that is very important thing that can be applied across just about any business is, communication. My sister is actually a marketer. She does a lot of business with me, and the thing that I had to adapt and learn from her as a creative person is I wanted to redo everything every time, right? So anytime some kind of communication was going out, I'm like altering it, changing the design, all that kind of stuff. And my sister would look at me and be like, you realize two things, right? One, you will never be able to get anything done at this level. And two, you can't keep changing the message. Like if you keep changing the message, it's not going to resonate. So, Jamaica has a gentleman who's I think he's participated here a couple of times, Michael Leachin, who's a multi-billionaire. One thing that I learned from him and realized from him in some recent years is he repeats the same thing over and over and over to the point where the observer would think that he's kind of just a stock record, right? But then what you start to realize is all he's doing is reinforcing the message he wants people to get. And he's not going to stop saying the same thing. So you could almost listen to him if he was sitting on this stage, and you could, if you have heard him a couple times, you could actually say the things that he's going to say. But it doesn't matter, because for him, he's just enforcing that message. So I have a message now that, it changes a little bit, but for the most part, anybody we're talking to, they hear that same thing. But I would like to just mention something based on the comments the two ladies made earlier, in terms of scale, and something that I've learned from a lot of these people that we've been dealing with in terms of some of the myths of scale, and you're hearing it from them, right? In terms of there are these ideologies out there where people think that entrepreneurship and business success equates to how many employees do I have, and scaling based on revenue. And what you might find sometimes is you can find billion-dollar businesses in the world that are barely scraping margins and profit, right? So $1 billion in revenue making $20 million US a year. Personally, I would never be interested in doing that, right? Because trying to manage that level of revenue to walk away with that profit is just not ideal. I'm not going to say that anybody designs that. That's not somebody's necessary goal. But just know that a lot of times when you see these glossy imageries out there of this company went from X revenue to this other number in this short period of time, and it sounds very magnificent, there is an underlying layer of management that is very, very difficult. And many people try to pursue these things, and there's nothing wrong with pursuing it. The challenge, I think, sometimes is when people feel that they are, not doing well because that's not what their narrative looks like, standard, right? And, I'm just sharing that it's not always the most beautiful narrative. I had an investment firm when I was 26 years old. We raised $2 million in a very short period of time. And, it's no longer. So there's a glossy side to all of this, and then there's the underbelly to it, which is that this stuff is, it's very challenging, and there's a management piece to quick growth that is not always the most ideal outcome or situation that people might be wanting to look for.
I think he's maybe trying to say, like, don't believe the glossy that you see all the time, because it is hard, and people see like the success stories and they don't understand like what goes under that.
Okay, and unfortunately, because our schedule was pushed back, we have to jump into Q&A. But before we do that, I want to ask, if you have a question, just come to one of these mics on each side. And while folks are coming, I want to ask you all a question, because there's several growth models from growing your business, whether it's partnerships, mergers, acquisitions. I know both of you had experience working with partners. If there's anyone in the room who's thinking about bringing a partner on board, merging with a company, can you just give them some quick advice on things that they should consider, things that they should look for in a good partner, and then we'll turn it over to the audience to get their questions in.
Definitely
briefly, like 30
get
seconds.
an agreement and a contract. And I think you would agree to that.
Yeah, a written agreement, but also be ready for it and be accessible, but it's like a marriage. So you want to do due diligence, make sure you're ready for partnership, there's joint ventures, there's a lot of different ways that you can structure that. And you don't have to go into business with someone to partner someone on a project. It's about optimizing resources.
I would agree, think through it, but I'm also a big believer in serendipity. So at the end of the day, I've had really bad partnership situations and I've had really great ones. And what I've always found is that every time the really bad outcomes happen, something very brilliant comes on the other side. And so there's a part of me that would encourage people to just always be open, right? You do want to try and put things in place, but I'm sure, you know, our attorney can tell us as well, you could prepare till thy kingdom come. There is always something that someone can do that is going to be, it's up to you, but it can be detrimental to you. And so it's very, very difficult to be over-prepared in these situations to the point where nothing happens, as Crystal even pointed to earlier. Like business is an everyday thing, you know, and the dynamics change.
Go with the flow. Thank you all so much. So I'm going to start with this young lady in the white over to my left.
Thank you, and thank you to the panelists for providing your insight. My name is Kimba Williams. I am the CEO of Couché, which is all natural care for down there. So Crystal, my question is for you. We've been in business for about 2.5 months now. We just launched in March 2018, super excited, but again, we're in a very taboo industry, right? Mm-hmm. No one's talking about vaginas every day. So I really want to understand from you, what was the point to where you found that you made the breakthrough that moved you from bootstrapping, because that's pretty much what we're doing, to kind of hitting it to where you said, okay, this is where we're going. And again, we're so, you know, so much in our infancy that I'm looking forward to that. I'm just wanting to hear a little bit more about that from you. And then, by the way, big up Kirk and everybody from Jamaica. Very good.
So my answer would be that I'm empathetic to my customer because I am my own customer.
Right.
Like I understand exactly what it is. So we don't do any gimmicky advertising or anything. And for the first 2 years, I did no advertising, like of growing, like at all. Just being empathetic. If you are your own customer, you know what your customer wants and you know what your customer needs. So you know where to correct it and where to fix it. And you just need to get in front of those right customers. Like I know who my core customer is, and my core customer is myself. So I know you know what you like. So you know what you would buy, you know like what you want to see, and that would be my best advice for you to know who your core customer are. If you are your core customer, then all you got to do is just really just look within yourself.
In addition to that too, I would say creating buyer personas, you know, who your ideal customer is very important. And so in that industry, talk to other women, see what their pain points are, get their cycle demographics. Where do you work? What do you do? What's your income level? So you know from A to Z what your client is and who they look like and how you can serve them and solve their problems. All right, I'm going to take this question over here.
Hi, my name is Vicky Sylvain, and I have a product as well. So this question is for Crystal. My product is the Shoe Bee. It's a clutch that expands to fit women's shoes. So I'm in the midst of, production is here in the States, and the costs are really high, so now I'm needing to actually investigate and look overseas, but it's a case of, I'm not sure as far as for your production, and identifying other outsourcing or more reasonable pricing. It's all here.
Yeah, so all of my production is done here in the US. I've been offered to make it cheaper,
right,
you know, overseas, but I need to watch my product. My background comes into that, where I can give you knowledge is just know how to talk the talk. So my production is costing me, I have negotiated my production to cost the same amount here than it would if I sent it overseas to Asia. And that's not something that I want to do. As entrepreneurs, we're afraid to ask for what we want. So say if you have a product and you want to pay, you know, 50 cents cost for it, we're afraid to say because we just think we're below, say, the production facility that you're dealing with. Tell them, say, no, I want to pay 50 cents. Like, could you actually don't even say 50 cents. Say, I want to pay 35 cents. Because then they're going to tell you 50 cents. And that's what, you don't have to send your stuff overseas. If you know how to talk the talk and really be confident in yourself, you can get exactly what you want right here. Because everybody, they're a business just like you. And they want to make that sale just like you. And they want to have your business. And they want to have that long-term business with you. And you just tell them what you want to pay, but just lower it a little.
Crystal's so New York, talk the talk. That's right. All right, I'm going to take you over here.
what I love about everybody, they're authentic. And when you're authentic, you'll be successful. My name is Kimberly Rozier Jean-Louis. I'm the director of the Minority Business Development Agency, funded by the U.S. Department of Commerce. We help small businesses grow. And one of the things I tell small businesses, make sure you have an attorney, you have a banker that can assist you. But what I want to hear from you is branding and the importance, if you could speak to the audience, the importance of branding and protecting your brand.
I can probably jump on that. So we stepped out from day one with one of the entities that we have called the Destination Experience. And I got up and said to Jamaica that I was going to start a global brand. I had no idea what I meant, to be fair. Now I've realized that. But we've been featured in, now numerous publications, right? And so the big thing for me was very early on, I came to the realization of some of the challenges you've heard in terms of this message that we were going to have to deliver. And I realized the need for us to have an extremely strong brand that is unquestionable. So now we're in a position where we have pushed very hard to end up in the major publications around the world. We've been mentioned in Black Enterprise, but also we've been featured in Forbes, we've been featured in Huffington Post, New York Times, and such like that. So we have spent a significant amount of time in curating a narrative, which I think is extremely important for any business owner, is to understand what you want people to take away from your business as a brand. We have spent a lot of time on personal branding in terms of the people within the organization, so that when people, one thing you start to realize is Google is a very powerful tool, right? And so anybody who hears about either your business or you, those are the two things they're doing before they respond to an email, right? They're looking you up and looking up the organization. The big thing with all of this is that it takes time, but you have to spend time focused on delivering excellence and, I don't want to say giving the appearance of excellence, because you always want substance, right? So I don't want anybody to go out there trying to build fluff. Fluff doesn't sell anymore. You want the substance underneath, but I think branding is extremely critical, because for us what it has done is that we have a vehicle now, which I'm careful to say is actually more powerful than walking into a room saying Jamaica, right? When we say to people, hey, we're the Destination Experience, here are the credentials, which have been mentioned so many times in global authorities, it has become a thing where they either want to participate or they don't, but they can't question it anymore. There was a time where they could be like, oh, well, Jamaica this, or, the Caribbean that, or who's involved in what you're doing. Now we've pushed our brand so hard that the only thing they can say is, I don't like you, or something, like they just can't question our brand itself, though. We've pushed very, very strong on that side.
All right. Next question, please.
How you doing? My name is Gary Robinson. I'm a business consultant at South Carolina State University, and I'm in a small, segregated town. So part of my question has to do with that part. But my question is, in looking at your target audiences, have you had to sell cross-culturally? And if so, what was your experience in dealing with selling to white people versus black people or Hispanic people? What has been your experience selling your product to different, by race?
Well, we sell worldwide. So our top countries are the US, UK, Australia, and Canada. And those are all different. Selling across is just a matter of a different currency. But as long as you have your branding, going back to the branding thing, and it resonates with your core customer, it doesn't matter what race you sell into. We sell to every single race. Like, we've shipped to every single country at this point.
I think that comes down again to narrative. So having a universal narrative is extremely important. And that doesn't mean you're selling to everyone, but within your customer base, you're not pulling out, any racial kind of...
Yeah, our policies are the same,
yeah.
Whether you're from Australia or you're from the US.
I'd like to speak to that, though. There is implicit bias everywhere. I think we come with a narrative, and so when you're in your business, you want to make sure that you're reaching out and talking to other people as well and understanding your own biases. But I think globally, you want to make sure that you are addressing people as people. And so if you approach it that way, then you experience what you intend, and I say that because that is what happens. And so when you approach it as you're helping someone and you're understanding what their need is and you're meeting their need, then you can holistically meet that need, because at the end of the day, it's about helping the person and generating revenue. But you don't want to get that twisted.
Thank you.
Right. Next question.
Good morning. My name is Gemma St. Lawrence. I am the founder and CEO of Art BNC. My platform will be, which I plan to launch in September, will be attracting emerging and independent artists who will sell their art directly to buyers and collectors. So I quickly want to be able to move, and it's part of my vision, to having the platform be easily accessible to artists in Canada, Central and South America, Africa, and the Caribbean. So I would like some advice and information on that global strategy and moving out from selling locally and nationally to internationally.
We are looking at Kirk.
So for me, what I did was very quickly, passionately, and with a lot of perseverance, just tapped into influence into the territories that we saw as targets, right? So again, it's the same thing. You're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of people not interested. You'll probably have a lot of unanswered emails. But it is extremely valuable to have advocates on your side in the places that you want to go into and have a response from. And the most important thing with that is, what value are you then creating for that person or group of persons to make them want to do that, or what affinity might they have? So one of the things for us that we found some success in, I mean, we've done a lot of other things as well, is some diaspora connections, right? Those are the people who are most likely to want to say something about Jamaica or Barbados or Trinidad or wherever else. And so managing to find those people have been somewhat key. But I mean, down to the same point from the question before, we found success with that same strategy in some of the most unlikely places as well, right? I walked up to the chief editor of Forbes one day. I saw him somewhere and I told him, listen, you've crafted a biased narrative for quite some time with the Caribbean, and I am now imploring you to be a part of shifting that. And he responded positively. And you know, he has no connection to Jamaica or the Caribbean. So I think you just need to, my strategy would be to first find ambassadors and influencers, and then also try to tap into bloggers who will see a value in what you want to create, because that's their community that they also want to help. And the main thing that I would be putting out there to start is, this is how this is going to help a group of people as opposed to anything else.
What about navigating the legal and you know, just general legal and business things that you need to do to operate in those territories?
Well, it sounds like your strategy is online, right?
Yes.
So I'll be careful here because I'm not the attorney, but I wouldn't think too much about that in the beginning, right? At the end of the day, if what you're gonna have is a sale of a product that moves through an online medium, I don't want to say the wrong thing only because I don't fully understand what the platform is going to look like, but you know, like we sell to people in the States, we sell to people in Canada, we sell to people in the UK and elsewhere, but I don't ever really have to consider much in regards to a legal responsibility to them, right?
So Kirk Anthony, what I'm going to have her do is speak
Talk to
to
me
Attorney
afterwards.
Edwards after so you can get some more information. So if you're looking to take that business offline. So we have time for 2 more questions. I'm going to take yours.
Sure. I have just a quick comment and then a question for Crystal. I just want to tell Bartina, your career trajectory sounds exactly where I want to go and what I'm trying to do. Go to law school after being out of school for 20 years. So it's good to kind of see that you're successful in what you're trying to do. So I'm trying to get there, so it's great to see you as an example of that. And then I have a question for Crystal. We were just debating about if we should self-invest or if we should look for angel investors. You self-invested. Was that a choice that you made on purpose to self-invest, or you had no choice, or what was your reason behind self-investing?
Very good question. So when I first started, by choice, it was to take my own funds and figure out who my core customer was and to figure out who my audience was. I didn't want to waste anyone's money. And then once I grew so fast, then I started to look into angel investing. But I didn't go really hard like how most people go about it because I like my own wealth and my own stuff. So we are raising around now, but that's because we have grown. Most people do it opposite. They have no product and they just go to angel investors and they look for funds. So my answer to you would be, when you think that you're ready, but you just have to remember, like I had to bring myself to realize that once I take somebody's money, that I am now responsible for that person's money and growing it. And it's not just my $35,000. So I did take angel investment of only $25,000, but I took his $25,000 and I flipped that into $1.1 million my first year. Wow. But it's a responsibility. And my husband could probably contest to this. The day that it got wired, I was like, oh my God. Like now I'm responsible. Like now I have to make this work. So it is something. And being as a Black woman, it is, even though I have grown my company so fast, it is still very, very hard. And it is one of the most difficult things. And we have so many strikes and we're like the underdog. And I don't really care about being the underdog because I know I'm gonna win regardless because of what I do, and that's just what you need to know. But do know that if you do decide that, you need to come. Just being a Black woman, and it's so sad, like just being a Black woman, like I said, $3 million of sales, and I still get no. I grew so fast in a year, and I still get no. So just imagine if you have absolutely nothing, and it's only because I don't fit that criteria that, the tech bro wants to, meet at the bar and, sit with and talk. Like, I'm married, I have 2 kids. I don't got no time for that. Let me just take your money and grow it. And they don't want to hear that. and it's something that you just have to decide for yourself. And I have no problem with, like I said, like now we are looking to raise the round because of my mission of what I want to do. But it is a big responsibility. And I remember the day that when that money got wired into my account, and I literally turned to my husband and I told him, like, now I feel like a responsibility, and you are giving away from something that you build, that you put your knit and your grit and your everything in, and you are now sharing it, and now you also have a responsibility to other people.
Pay that back.
I want to say something that too, when I advise clients, use your own money to make money. So just because you're in the best position when you have money to get capital, so for those who are already looking at using their own money, or maybe who have jobs or whatever the case is, get your insurances in place, get your lines of capital in place, and just because you have $35,000, now you can show that $35,000 and get lines of capital and those kinds of things, so you'll have it when you need it. Not saying get a lot of debt or build up a lot of debt, but you'll have what you need while you're in the best position to do that. And then if you really are successful, then you don't have to also look at doing it in that way. So there are a lot of different options and techniques you can utilize in terms of how you get capital.
Thank you both.
30-second anecdote for everyone in the room. When you raise $1 million and you tell someone that your company is worth $10 million, this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but you ultimately have to create over $10 million in value off of $1 million, which is not an easy thing to do. And that's what they don't talk about in all of these stories. I just came from San Francisco. You hear the stories of someone raising up to $70 million, $100 million, and then the company sells for $25 million, right? Those are the stories that you hardly ever hear about. The myths are the ones that you always read, right? The $1 billion sale and all of this kind of stuff. But don't buy into it too quickly.
Don't believe the hype. All right, last question.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sophia Hardaway, and I own a UPS store. I've been in business for a year now. So now I understand that Ms. Bartina, I believe it is, she said something about scaling and hiring. I'm at that point where I don't understand, or I shouldn't, or should. I'm interested in revenue but not interested in increasing my payroll. So how do you invest in your current associates, or how do you get them to step up to the plate, or what techniques did you take in order to continue along that path?
I was very transparent with my folks. So the first thing is I had to understand and speak my truth and understand my truth, and I just didn't want to work hard in order to make the money.
Right.
So how do I generate this revenue without having to work harder? And that sounds like a cliche, but there are ways in which you do that. So I came up with a model and some opportunities where I could partner with some folks, do some associations without giving up my equity in my business, without giving up my control and those kinds of things. But then I had an honest conversation and I did the data. So you have to, that's the hard part, because in business at that point, you have to have policies, procedures, know your metrics, know your performance indicators. What is it taking me to generate this amount of income? What is it taking me to generate this amount of revenue? And at the end of the day, I decided I don't want to manage people anymore. I want to manage a business, and I'm fine with that, but I don't want it to manage me. So once I came through all of that sort of holistic realization, I then had a very transparent conversation with my staff. And I sat down and said, I'm not interested in doing workers' compensation. I'm not interested in doing this. How can I help you, and how can we help each other in this way, because we're not looking at growing. Ended up finding out that 2 people wanted to have firms of their own, so I helped them to actually get firms of their own, and they're still successful today. 1 person ended up moving, and so there are different things in which, and I retained some staff, and so we worked through that, and as he said, serendipitously, things just happen. That's when I knew I was on the right path. Confirmation is a wonderful thing, but it's part of being prepared. So I had to step back and say, gosh, I got to take the time to now run numbers and do all of this kind of stuff. So it's some work, and it really takes a lot of time. And entrepreneurs are the worst to work with because we don't put a lot in writing. We don't have a lot of written information, a lot of documentation on the front end. Once you start to build that business, that changes. Or you won't be successful. But on the front end, that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time to work with us. So I just worked with my people. I was transparent. But be clear first. And that depends on the kind of staff you have. That depends on what you have in terms of what that approach is. But that's what I did.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us. You have some homework today, whether it's identifying your target audience or coming up with a forecasting plan to grow your business. So let's give our panelists a round of applause and thank them for the information.